Welcome to the Mindful Escape podcast. My name's Leighton Jewett and I'm your host. And today we have a very special guest. Veronica didn't decide to leave the corporate world. She was forced to. A unique set of circumstances encouraged her to change her mindset, overcome challenges, and learn lessons that she never thought she would have to. Today, she is helping people all over the world, and she tells a really exciting story. So listen closely, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Veronica, thank you so much for coming on to the Mindful Escape. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Hi, Leighton, and everyone who is watching us from all over the world. I'm actually based in Hong Kong. And a little bit about myself. So I like to tell people that I'm a global citizen because I was born in Spain, but I've lived in 9 countries. So Hong Kong is my country number 9. And I speak languages. So I like to tell people as well that that's my superpower. What makes me me? So is my passion for diversity, my passion for sports as well. I'm a triathlete, but my most important job is a CEM, Chief Executive Mom of 2 beautiful young daughters. But I think the reason why I'm here today is because you all want to know how I ditched the corporate world and started my journey as a solopreneur, right?
Absolutely. So maybe take us back. How long ago was it? What were you doing? And tell us what made you want to make that leap.
Sure. So my story, and I think everyone has a bit of a different story. I did not want originally to take that step. It kind of happened accidentally. So to give a little bit of context, this is 2021, August. We're living in Hong Kong and I'm working in the corporate world. So I live with my 2 daughters on holidays to go to Spain, but this is the middle of the pandemic. And as soon as we land, they changed the quarantine policy in Hong Kong and we're stuck abroad. So we're not able to come back. And my husband is here in Hong Kong and my dog is here in my house and my life. So we're in Spain and I end up getting locked abroad with my 2 daughters. So after a few months, things don't get better, things get worse in Hong Kong. So we go to Australia, which is my husband's country. And things continue to get worse. We can't even go back to Hong Kong. At this point, I already quit my job because I couldn't come back. And after a few months of sending job applications and cover letters and trying to get a job in the corporate world, I don't receive any positive feedback. So at that point, I really start to think bigger and think different and think, well, if the corporate world is not wanting me, where can I find a new me? And having time being unemployed was actually a gift because it allowed me to change my mindset. And I actually wrote a book about it called The Lemon Tree Mindset. So as you know, in English, we say, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. But I disagree. I think that when life gives you lemons, you have to use the seeds and plant your own lemon tree. And that's how the idea of the book, but my entire philosophy came about. So that's a little bit about my journey. It was not planned. I'm not going to tell you that I had a strategic master plan and everything was unfolding. No, it was life gave me a bunch of lemons and I decided to take a bunch of seeds and start to plant a bunch of lemon trees.
Yeah, amazing. And how were you feeling at that time? Because I'd imagine it can't have been that easy being locked out of your home, essentially.
It was such an alienating feeling. I felt like I was in a movie because when you say you're locked abroad, people are like, what do you mean? What do you mean you can't go back? And the fact of being separated with my husband when our kids were 3 and 4, it was emotionally very, very tough. And especially at that age, for little people, 3 months is an eternity. 6 months is like a whole life. My youngest one, she forgot to speak English after 3 months. And so when she saw daddy, because he came to visit during that period, during that year and a half, she was speaking to him in Spanish and he was replying in English and she couldn't understand why her dad wouldn't speak back. So it was emotionally, as a mom, it was very challenging. It was emotionally challenging as a wife because I was separated from my husband for a month and without having a timeline. I think that was the hardest part. Mm-hmm. And then from a career standpoint, it was very challenging as well because my background was really in corporate. I had been working for Apple for 7 years. I had then worked for Estée Lauder, so big corporations for over 15 years. And all of a sudden, finding myself in a place where I thought I would be able to get a job pretty much overnight because I had worked hard to build my career. And being in a new country, Australia, where I didn't have a network, didn't know people, I was the foreigner with an accent, which doesn't help. So that was very tough for my ego to go from someone who had like a very senior role in big organizations to someone who didn't even have a network anymore. So emotionally, it was a bit of a roller coaster with mostly downs than highs.
Yeah. Gosh, I can't even imagine. All right. So you're working at these big corporate companies. What kind of roles were you doing there in terms of the field?
So it was always in leadership roles and business development. To give a couple of examples, when I was working at Apple, I was the head of Hong Kong and Macau for the B2B unit. So selling basically products and solutions to businesses, not to retail. And then when I worked at Estée Lauder, I was the senior director for the entire region, so for Asia Pacific, for one of the brands in retail. So strong background in sales, in leadership experience, in people development. And I went from all of that to zero, to nothing.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us, what were the next steps? So you're in this position, you can't get a job, you're out of your country, and what do you do?
So first, as I was saying before, I was really working on the mindset. I was initially having a victim's narrative. I don't have a job because I'm new here and I don't have a network, so therefore it's more difficult for me. And so I was building all this narrative that was really in a way to justify why I wasn't having success. And then all of a sudden I had this realization that I could really focus on the things that I could control. And there was much more under my control than what I thought. So very specifically, when I was telling myself recruiters or hiring managers don't see value in me, I changed that narrative into, I know I have value. It's up to me to show it. So that was the first change in mindset. The second one was about the network. It's true, I was a foreigner in a new country, but I'm able to build new relationships, and people are not going to knock on my door except the delivery man. So I started to work on networking as well, and said, well, if I don't have my network, I'm just going to build it. And so this change of mindset was crucial. And I want the people in the audience to really understand that if you're going to make this change, it really starts with your mindset. It really starts with believing in yourself, with having self-confidence, with understanding that you have value, that we all have value. And it's up to us to make sure that people see it, because sometimes it's not obvious. So that's how my journey started. I was like, okay, if they don't see the value, I'm going to create it. So I started to go on LinkedIn. I posted my very first post in July 2022. Took me a lot of courage because I'm a rather not a very exposed or extroverted person by nature. And so going out there in a platform where you have a bunch of strangers and people who know you, and all of a sudden start posting, I had a lot of self-doubts. So that was one thing. But I did it anyways, and I started to write articles about topics that showed my expertise. I started to comment on other people that were in a similar field. I started to reach out. And that was really when the mindset started to reflect into change in behavior. So instead of waiting, I was putting myself out there. Instead of complaining about not having a network, I built it, not only on LinkedIn, but also in person. I love sports, so I joined triathlon club, a swim club, a run club. So I started to meet a lot of people. And that also helped me boost my confidence, because you have the ability to go out there, and thanks to technology, building relationships, it's more accessible than ever. And so that's the message. Start with a mindset, and then let that mindset like transform itself into specific behaviors.
Yeah, great. So I've got two specific questions around that. One is, when you started posting on LinkedIn, did you have an end goal in mind?
Yes, originally my end goal was still to find a job in corporate. And that's why I say I'm not the person who had everything figured out and had a master plan to become a solopreneur. My initial intention was to find a job. What happened is, as I started to create content, first I started to rediscover an old passion of mine, which is writing. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. I love writing. So on the side, I started to write, and I started to write a book. And I started to write on Medium as well, which is a writing platform that pays writers. So that was one thing. The second thing is, as I started to post and create content, the value that people didn't see before, now it was obvious, because I was making a point of it being obvious. I had 18 years of experience under my belt. If I'm not able to sell that 21, then I better do something else. And so I, through posting and through being active and really showing my expertise and my credentials, I started to have opportunities that I had never contemplated before. So I had companies contact me and ask me, hey, would you like to be a freelance, like an expert on demand for your topics, which is like retail and leadership in Asia. So that was one. Then the next one was a company in diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a topic that I'm super passionate about as a global citizen, as I was saying at the beginning. And I had an opportunity to work for them as a consultant, which is the main job that I do as a freelancer. So I consult for them. And then from there, things just kept on happening. So another company, through previous relationships, contacted me and asked me if I wanted to be a facilitator and a speaker for them in a corporate training and corporate leadership. So I accepted that as well. And then at one point I was like, actually, maybe I don't want to be in this corporate box anymore. Maybe there are other boxes, or maybe I don't want to be inside a box at all. and so that's how the thing unfolded. It was very spontaneous, but it goes back to the lemon tree mindset of saying, well, if life gives you lemons, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to transform those challenges into opportunities? No one came from the corporate world with an opportunity in the corporate world, but I created my own opportunities. And that's a nice message for people to listen to, that you can actually create your opportunities if they don't come your way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so good. And my second question was about the mindset, because obviously you started posting every day and that helped you, the writing helped build the confidence, and obviously opened up opportunities for you. Were there any other tips or tricks or any advice you would give to people who are feeling a little bit stuck in their mindset, what they could start doing today to help them feel a bit more confident and start moving themselves in the right direction?
So the advice that I'm going to give, and maybe it's not the most standard advice, is that you don't have to have a big plan. You don't have to have a big strategy. You don't have to have the perfect post. And I think what keeps people from doing things is this idea of perfection. And I always say that the opposite of action is perfection in reality, because when you're seeking perfection, the result is that you very often procrastinate because nothing is ever good enough. My first post was not good enough, but my today's post was not good enough either. And so if you're waiting to have that perfect post, the perfect plan, the perfect exit escape, is not going to happen. And so my plan is, try to not to take yourself too seriously. Try to put yourself out there. If you don't have your niche from day one, which I didn't, it's fine, because you're testing and you're trying and you're experimenting. And where I am today, so 8 months later, I'm miles away. And I didn't even know that was the journey that I was going to follow. But I had this mindset of, go out there and take risk and try things. And last month, I just published my first ebook, and I had no idea of what I was doing. But my first ebook is out there. And now I can say I'm a published Amazon writer. And I know that my next book is going to be better. So I think that's the mentality, like take your risk and put yourself out there and forget about perfection, because action is really what's going to give you momentum.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's not about reaching that big goal in one day, as you say, taking one step at a time, just moving yourself in the right direction. That's amazing. I love that. So it sounds like the biggest challenge was the mindset. And obviously you moved into this writing way of living essentially fairly quickly. What other lessons did you learn along the way?
So a big lesson for me was that it's important to be vulnerable. I think many people, especially when you have many years of corporate experience and you have had senior roles, it's hard to open up and be a little bit vulnerable and tell the truth, which is, you know what, I don't have a job, or actually I'm doing something that I'm not really passionate about, and then just like, I like to use the expression open the vulnerability door, because you become so much more approachable when people see that you're human and you have your struggles, and you're also trying to figure things out. And for me, being a more private person, it was a big step. You can imagine, like after 18 years of, big roles and corporate experience, to go out there. My first post was actually SOS, my world turned upside down. And I went to explain everything that had happened in that year. So for the audience to get a little bit more specific into what I mean, my post was SOS, my world turned upside down. 2022 was the year where I didn't have a job. I was separated from my husband. I received so many rejections from recruiters and so on, like a list of negatives. And then the second part of the post was, but 2022 was also the year in which I decided to create my own network. I decided to do this. I decided to start writing. I took over 50 courses on LinkedIn Learning. And so it was really a post that was illustrating this mindset mentality, and how the same situation can have very complete different reads depending on how you look at it and the mindset that you have.
Yeah, and I think there's something so powerful about just being your authentic self, especially on LinkedIn, on all social media, because there's so much facade, there's so much fakeness. And yeah, as you say, if you can be vulnerable and just be yourself, I think you'll get a much better response.
Absolutely. So that was one of the things that really helped me. And the second one is if you're going to start the world of freelance or solopreneur, the word itself, solo means lonely, alone. So it's a lonely world, and you're going to be by yourself. So I think it's very important that you start to think teamwork. You start to think a mindset of abundance. You start to think partnerships. And what I mean by these is try to think how you can create these partnerships that you're not going to have on your own. So to be very specific, I reached out to a creator that I love. She's a personal brand strategist. And I didn't even have a job at the time, but I said, hey, I love what you're doing. This is my situation. I don't have a job. I don't have a network, all these things. I'm new in a country. She was in Australia. And I said, but I think there's something for us to do because they're together, because there are so many people who are in my same situation that could probably benefit from my experience. So that was around 6 months ago. 6 months later, we've done 2 podcasts together. We have a LinkedIn Live every Thursday that we do 30 minutes of a personal brand, building authority. The one of yesterday was called You've Been Laid Off, Now What? So every Thursday we do that. And we're hosting our very first personal branding course starting in April together. So Amazing. This mentality of partnership, it helps you open new possibilities, new collaborations. I wouldn't be here if you hadn't reached to me. And just being open to collaborate, whether it's podcasts, which I have done a few already with different creators, whether it's LinkedIn Lives, whether it's I have a newsletter, so I support all the writers that I know of, and when we know each other's work, so we support each other. And so finding those partnerships is very good for the business, but I think it's also very good for your soul, because you don't want to be lonely in this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually really fascinating, because I think you were really forced into this journey, and most people listening are probably, I guess there might be a few people out there, but the majority of the people are currently in their corporate world right now. So one of the questions I usually ask the guests is, what advice would you give yourself? But I think I'll change that today and say, what piece of advice would you give to people who are in their corporate life right now, maybe feeling a little bit stuck with what they're doing, have an idea or a passion that they'd like to pursue? What kind of advice would you give them? So
I could give them 19 advices, because when I wrote my book, it was called 19 Lessons to Reinvent Yourself. So I'm not going to go through the entire 19, but I'm going to just touch upon a few that I think are relevant. The first one, and this is how I started this the book and post that I've written as well, is 1 in 8 billion. That's how special you are. Find your superpowers. And it sounds cheesy, but I break it down. And what I mean by superpowers is that we all have our unique skill set. We all have our unique personality, lived experiences, and so on. And when you're able to find the point of convergence between your skills and your passion, that's where you want to invest your time. That's where you want to invest your money. If you're investing on skills that you're not really passionate about, if you're in a job that you're not really passionate, I think it's important to rethink that. What is that area of convergence where you're skilled and where you have passion? So that's the number one thing that needs reflection. It's not that obvious. Some people might think, oh, I don't really have anything special. So that needs a little bit of reflection. So that's the number one point. And then the second one, particularly if you're in the corporate world, and particularly if you work for a big brand, like I was for the Apples and the Amazons and the Salesforce of this world, when you're working for those companies, you feel a little bit invincible. You feel important because you're working for an important brand. You give your business card and people go like, oh, wow, Apple. And so you get a little bit overconfident that the brand that you work for is an extension, or you're an extension of that brand. And that's absolutely not true. The moment that you're not in that brand anymore, you're not you don't have a brand. And that's my message. You don't have a brand. So when I wasn't working for Apple, when I wasn't working for Estee Lauder, I realized, wow, I'm Veronica and no one knows me. No one knows what my personal brand is. No one knows what I stand for. No one knows what makes me unique. And if I could go back 3 years when I was in the corporate world, if there was something that I could do then, is start working on your personal brand. And it doesn't mean that you have to openly say that you're looking for a job or that you want to start your freelance career, but you can start to have a name for yourself. You can start to think, how do I want to be known for? You can start to actively create content on LinkedIn. You can participate in forums, in whatever expertise you are at. And for me, that's one of the biggest advices that I wish someone had given me, although I don't know if I would have taken it then, but build your personal brand, because if you invest in yourself, your personal brand is yourself. No one is more vested than you are in your success, in your brand, in yourself. So if you're going to invest in anything, invest in yourself.
Yeah, I really love that advice, because speaking to people who have already left their job and have started maybe their own business or trying to do something outside of what they were doing before, as you say, they are starting from scratch. And from my own personal experience, I've noticed that what I do today I might not see the effects of that for another 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, who knows? And as you said, if I had started building my personal brand maybe 3, 4 years ago on platforms such as LinkedIn and building my network, it would be, although at the time, same as you, I would have been like, I haven't got time for this, I'm too busy doing my job. It would have made today so much easier, because you would have built up your personal brand, you would have built up your connections, and you would be known for different things. So yeah, I really love that piece of advice. It's just doing little things to help you, or to help the future you, I think.
Absolutely. And then to build on that, and that was one of the other lessons, is it's not 0% or 100%, it's incremental. And you're doing a little thing every single day. Over time, it's a tsunami. And to give an example, when I started writing on Medium in September, I was new. I had 2 followers. One was my husband. The other one was my friend who introduced me to Medium, my 2 followers. And then I started writing an article every day. And I would show up every day, many days, especially the 2 first weeks. No one read my articles for 2 weeks. But I kept on going and I kept on showing up every day. And then as I became better, I was more fluent at writing. So some days I would write 2 articles. And then slowly the likes and the clubs started to happen. So after a month, I started to have a little bit of momentum. And now when I tell people that 6 months later is right on the 6-month mark today, I've written 327 articles. People are like, what? It sounds huge, but an article a day, and I'm not even talking about a huge article. Some of them were short, some of them are a little bit longer. It doesn't sound that overwhelming. Instead of watching Netflix, which I seldom do these days, I write. So I write a little article every day, and now I can say 327 articles in 6 months and 2,600 plus followers. So it's incremental.
Yeah, that's so good. I think let's sum it up there with start taking steps and then keep showing up. Happy with that? Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on, Veronica. It's been really good.
Thank you so much.
And there we have it, another exciting story from someone who's escaped the corporate world and is now living their dream life. The biggest takeaway for me from that episode was not having to have a big goal at the start of the journey and just showing up every day. I think there's something so powerful, especially if you're living in that corporate lifestyle right now and you're not sure what to do. Just start doing something. That might be journaling. It might be thinking about the direction you want to go in. Taking time to consider what you're passionate about and what you enjoy, and just doing something little every single day. Keep showing up, keep moving in the right direction, and one day you will have your dream life. If you want to follow Veronica, she's over on LinkedIn. Her surname is Llorca-Smith, spelled Llorca-Smith. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, follow, subscribe, ring the bell, and we'll see you next week for another exciting story.